Now we're all spending a lot of time at home, so what better time than now to do some experimenting in the kitchen? Personally, I've been making a ton of sourdough bread, and I've also been experimenting with my sous vide immersion cooker. Now, I'm not huge on a bunch of fancy kitchen gadgets, but the sous vide tool is a little different. By submerging food, I love to cook meats by this method. You're able to achieve perfectly cooked to temp, tender, juicy meat from edge to edge every time.
Now I love a good bone-in pork chop. I'm not talking about the thin or boneless kind. I'm talking the kind that when done right, it's like a good steak. And if there were ever a piece of meat perfect for sous vide, it's chops. Let's do it. Here's what you need. Bone-in, thick-cut pork chops, red-skin potatoes, Brussels sprouts, olive oil, garlic cloves, crushed red pepper, cumin, red wine vinegar, and fresh herbs. I'm using these locally grown garlic chives, but you can use whatever you have on hand, like parsley or cilantro. You'll also need a sous vide cooking device and a large container. Begin by washing your chops well under cool water. Give them a douse of vinegar or lemon to ensure they're extra clean. Next, we'll season up the chops, but first, a quick kitchen tip. For easy cleanup when seasoning meat, make a cutting board out of cling wrap to create a large surface for seasoning that lets you skip the mess. We'll season these chops liberally with sea salt and coarse pepper on both sides and edges. Next, we'll get them ready for the sous vide. Today, I'm using large ziplock freezer bags, which work well for sous vide cooking if you don't have a vacuum sealer. Typically, you'd vacuum seal food in plastic pouches to submerge in water, but large bags work well as the top is above the water line and water can't enter. I'm doing 2 chops per bag. Once in, try to get as much air as possible out of the bags and seal. Now, on to prepping the sous vide setup. In addition to your immersion cooker, you'll need a container large enough to cook in. I'm using a 12-quart container, which I'm filling with water to use for the cook. Be sure your water comes within the minimum and maximum fill lines on your immersion cooker. Plug in, then submerge the sous vide into the container and clip to the side. Next, you'll set your temperature and timer. I want to cook the pork chops to medium, as they'll come up in temperature a little during the sear. So I'm setting the temp to 140 degrees to cook for 4 hours. Now, use clips to submerge the bagged chops into the water and secure to the container. The cook timer won't begin until your water reaches your desired temperature. And that's it. We'll set it and forget it and move on to our sides. Grab 2 large sheet pans and preheat in a 400-degree oven. Wash your Brussels sprouts and red skin potatoes well. Cut off the stem end of each Brussels sprout, remove any discolored leaves, then cut them in half. Add to a bowl and drizzle with olive oil. Cut your red skin potatoes and put into a shallow dish. Add about 6 cloves of chopped garlic, drizzle with olive oil, then season with sea salt, crushed red pepper, and cumin. Mix up really well. Now add the potatoes to the sheet pan that's been preheating and spread to begin roasting. Pour the Brussels sprouts onto the second preheated pan and spread around. Season those well with salt and pepper before roasting. Now that our sides are in the oven, we'll make a yummy herb butter for the chops. I'm combining butter with some of those garlic chives, a few thyme sprigs, and some chopped garlic. Set this aside. Remove the Brussels sprouts from the oven after 20 minutes. Give a good squeeze of lemon. I also add a Goya veg pack and set aside. Now, stick a cast iron pan in the oven to preheat. We'll use this pan to sear our pork chops. Your roasted potatoes come out of the oven after 35 minutes. They should be crisp on the outside and tender in. Transfer the potatoes to a bowl, then add red wine vinegar and your herbs. I'm adding chopped garlic chives, and I love the zest that cilantro brings to these potatoes, so I'm adding a handful of that as well. The sous vide lets us know the chops are ready. and it's time to finish them with a mean sear to build serious texture and flavor. Move the chops from the cooking bag and pat them dry very well with paper towels. It's important that they're dry before we sear. Turn on your stove, then move that hot pan that's been preheating in the oven to the stove top. Add a little bit of a high temp oil. I'm using corn oil and bring it to a near smoke. Now, let's finish these chops. I'll add the first 2 pork chops to the scorching hot pan to begin the sear. After 3 to 4 minutes, it's time to flip. Look at that color. While the other side is searing, we'll add our herb butter and let that melt into and over the meat. What we are doing in this process is elevating these chops that are moist and perfectly cooked on the inside and building crisp, caramelized flavor on the outside. When searing, don't forget to also brown the sides. When finished, we'll remove to a board and let the meat rest. Cutting into it reveals a crisp, flavorful crust with tender, juicy interior. And look at the color of this meat. From edge to edge, it is cooked evenly and perfectly throughout. Serving this up with roasted Brussels, spicy herb potatoes, and the thyme butter, it's a classic meat and potatoes plate with layers of flavor. Thanks to sous vide, there really is no country for dry, overcooked pork chops. Bon appetit! Next up, we'll turn to the pantry and slow cooker to make a simple, satisfying white bean and kale soup with a throwback, hot water cornbread. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and be sure to subscribe. Recipes posted weekly. To see what I'm cooking daily, tips, and other fun content, join me on social media. I'm at Omni Enthusiast on IG, Facebook, and at omnienthusiast.com.